Welcome everybody to today's interest session. Interest is our ETIC remote engagement sessions in technology. It's a program I started here at ETIC quite a few years ago to engage students in technologies that are not necessarily provided as structured coursework. They're proprietary in nature, but there's a lot of jobs for them specifically. So it's kind of our way of letting you know what's out there software-wise and systems-wise. And also preparing you to get some hands-on activities. Most of these technologies are free to download and free to use. They are things that you can start learning now in preparation for graduation, and they're really useful as well. So today we're talking about developing applications with using Microsoft Visual Studio. So Visual Studio is a Microsoft product, so it is proprietary in nature. It is not open source, but it is the #1 IDE, integrated development environment tool for creating software applications. So more people use Visual Studio and more organizations and companies use Visual Studio than any other product out there. So to have a program like this, and it is useful for you to understand where to get it, how to download it, how to use it, and how to navigate it. So that you can start building your own applications and getting some experience is pretty useful. Okay. If I have not introduced myself, I am Dr. Mike Nizick. I work for New York Tech, professor in the computer science department here, and I also am the director of the Entrepreneurship and Technology Innovation Center at ETIC, where we provide these types of programs for you. Okay, so you can access us at nyit.edu/ETIC. Our YouTube channel is handle is at NYIT ETIC. There's a lot of videos there on all kinds of technologies. Every time we do one of these sessions, we record it and post it. So over the years, we built up a lot of good content. So there's things up there for, Linux command line and Windows command line and, cybersecurity as a career and blockchain technologies, all kinds of stuff. So hopefully you enjoy the channel. And when this one is done and prepared, it'll be uploaded as well. Okay. So let's talk about Microsoft Visual Studio. So Visual Studio is what we call an IDE, integrated development environment. So it's not a programming language in itself. C# is the actual programming language that you'll use in Visual Studio. It's a C family of languages, but it's Microsoft's proprietary version of it, which basically accesses the .NET framework, we call it. So there's .NET framework is all the tools and kind of controls that are available for you to build include in your application from Microsoft. And Visual Studio uses the .NET application to help you quickly build applications. We use it a ton at ETIC for our prototyping applications. Almost every product we create is built in Visual Studio, and a lot of our web-based content is built with Visual Studio and C#. And a lot of our desktop applications are built with C#. So basically, hopefully at the end of the session, you'll see the power of it and you'll understand where to get it and how to use it, and be something else to put on your resume too. So I always like to talk about money, one of my favorite topics, but in the same note, career-wise, what does it mean for you to, learn something, spend the time to get better at something, right? Well, there are thousands and thousands of jobs that are .NET development and Visual Studio development. So I think in this one search I did here that I'm showing you, it was something like 6,000 jobs available at that time whenever I did this. And the salary is probably even higher now, but even back then, you'll see senior .NET application developer. Now, senior doesn't mean, 20 plus years. Senior means 3 to 5 years. So if you get a year of programming and developing in school, like while you're working, students that work at ETIC, they work here, on projects. So they're working on projects already. We have a certificate program here too that you can volunteer to work on projects, and that will count. That counts towards your year of development. So if you go to work for a company for 2 years and you have a year experience already, you're at that 3 to 5 year senior .NET application developer. So some of these salaries are extremely attractive, life-changing in many ways, just for one technology. It's not even all the other technologies that are involved. The Visual Studio itself and the .NET framework are available. So whenever you're building applications, you do use a number of different languages depending on what you're building. C# is the actual programming language that Visual Studio focuses on for building Microsoft applications. Now, C# is down on the list of top programming languages. The primary reason is because it's proprietary in nature, right? It's not that it's not good, it's that you have to use a Microsoft platform. So if you're a company and you build a business and you're trying to sell that business and someone sees that you built your stuff on C#, there may be an issue with that, not usually, but they could be. So a lot of people use open source technology so that they never have to really pay a licensing fee in the future. What it doesn't show as far as popularity of languages is that C# is, as far as corporate applications, internal applications where companies build their own technologies to streamline their activities and build applications to attach to their databases and do machine learning and things like that. It's like the #1 language, right? So Visual Studio and C# for building internal applications, which is where a lot of the hiring comes from. Companies that want to just be more efficient and write their own software to automate their processes. That's where a lot of this, falls into play. So as far as IDEs go, Visual Studio is the IDE we're talking about today. IDEs usually allow you to build applications in the language or in the domain that you're talking about, right? So you have like Eclipse in Android, or Eclipse as an example is a NetBeans and IntelliJ. They are Java developers, right? You have Android Studio, which is also Java, but it's also phone app development for the Android operating system. And you have PyCharm for Python and all that, but with Visual Studio, it allows you to do all of it. And the controls you use are always the same no matter what you build. So what happens is once you learn the controls, once you learn the syntax, once you learn a language, whether you want to build a desktop application, a console application, a web-based application, a phone application, a tablet application, or a website, you don't have to use anything else, right? That's the beauty of it. Once you learn it and you get really, really efficient at it, it doesn't matter what your bosses ask you to create one day, you can do it all in the same application. When you learn one IDE and you become really good at it, everything you do down the road becomes faster and faster and faster because you're not struggling around. You're like, where do I do this? Where do I do that? If you use 3 or 4 different IDEs and you're trying to create 3 or 4 different applications all the time, like every week, you're juggling things left and right. If you use the one application, a lot of times it becomes, it becomes second nature to you, right? So just a clarification, I always like to do in some of these seminars, as far as code versus IDE. IDE is the platform, is the program you're using. It's software itself, to be honest with you. It's software that basically lets you manage your software design, right? So the IDE, the environment, is how you're sharing code with the user, how you're managing your code, how you're organizing it, the hierarchical nature of packages, projects, packages, classes and methods and functions and stuff like that. So that's the IDE visually represents all that to you, and lets you work cleaner and more efficient and faster. The coding is what you decide to code in, right? It's the compiled, the code is going to be compiled into machine language, so it runs on these operating systems of these devices, right? So the code, it's when we say C# or .NET or ASP.NET or Visual Studio is the IDE. .NET is the actual platform that you're using. C# is the language, right? So it's very similar to your Java and your C, the C family language. The other thing I like to do in these, since many times the attendees that we get are developers, or at least going to be developers, whether you know what it is or not, or you are guaranteed to be working in this environment. It's called the Agile environment, right? And there are 12 core principles of the Agile environment. So when you're developing applications and you're working in the software environment, they're going to want you to work in Agile. Now, there's 12 of these, self-organizing teams, maintain a constant pace, attention to technical excellence, right? So all these different things, deliver working software frequently. These 12 tenets of Agile, this is what they want you to do, right? In the old days, you'd go into a job and you'd be like, I'm good at what I do, and I'm going to do only what I do, and I'm not going to share my information or my knowledge. I'm not going to help people. I'm going to do what I do, and it really caused a lot of issues in industry. Agile has a couple of key tenets, and it's basically, work with other programmers, share information, work in pairs, deliver frequent updates to customers so that they see progress, right? On the contract. So keep in mind, as we're using the IDE today, Visual Studio, it's designed to really help you stay within these Agile core principles. And that's really, this application that you're going to see today also helps to really stay within this Agile environment, which is what companies are looking for you to do. And it just kind of gives you a more secure job at your organization. Okay, So there are a couple of like enterprise versions of Visual Studio, but Community is the free one, and it doesn't do anything different than the full one. What it does is it limits the amount of people that can connect at the same time and share code and all that. So you couldn't use Community to manage a team of 20 programmers, but you could do it to practice and learn on your own, and you could do it to build a small company and things like that. But so Community will give you everything pretty much that the full enterprise version does. It's just, the environment you'd be able to use it in is different. So, and it's kind of a genius business approach from Microsoft, because once they get people using the free version, they see how kind of useful it is and easy it is, and then they just kind of adapt to that in the organization. Okay. All right, so we're going to transition into the demo. And during that piece, I'll show you everything I can in the time frame that Visual Studio kind of can do. Okay, this is our training and demo server that I use for most of our interest stuff. And one of the things that you'll see as we go into this is that there's no real difference in starting Visual Studio. There's no magic to it. It's just an application. It's an install like you would do anywhere, anything else that you would use on your desktop. So you would basically just go to that website that you just saw in the prior slide for Visual Studio Community, download it, install it, and then you'll have all these applications that we do today. All right. So one of the things you'll see, just like any other program, you kind of can navigate through the menu options. You have different things you can do. The most important one is starting a new project. Now, one of the things that you'll see is when you start a new project, a Visual Studio product it's going to ask you, look, I can do a million things. What do you want to create, right? So, do we want to create an ASP.NET web-based development tool, right? Do we want to have something that we run on a website, on a web server, and the entire world can get to it, right? Fine. That's what you would choose. Do we want to create a Visual C# application that's just going to run on one machine? Maybe we want to write something that's going to configure a printer, configure a device, or connect to a network or whatever it is. Maybe we want to write something that's only going to run on one machine. We don't need to give it to 11 billion global users, right? Totally possible, totally feasible. So depending on what someone's asking you to write, and usually in a job they're asking you to write it for money, within a time frame, within constraints, and it has to do certain things, you're going to pick what type of application you need to create. There's something called a console app. And in a console app, there's no user interface. It just runs behind the scene, right? So when you think about writing a program that's going to go and do a whole bunch of operating type stuff, delete this folder, create this folder, clean up these applications or whatever, or change the names of files or create a log of files, you don't really need user interaction for that. So you don't need a user interface. You don't need somebody to trigger it. You just need a program that's going to run. And when it runs, it does a whole bunch of stuff you want it to do. Okay. That's a console app. It has no user interface whatsoever. When you click on it, it'll just run. And that's the idea. Now, the one thing in Visual Studio that you'll notice is that it creates executables, right? So it's creating desktop apps. Now in Java, like Eclipse and NetBeans, we create jars, .jars, which are executables, but they are Java executables, which means they're system agnostic. You can run those Java applications on any different system. Executables can be run on Windows-based systems, right? So Windows Mobile, Windows, Windows Tablet, Windows applications, Windows Server, all those Windows applications can run these applications that you create. A web-based application, right? A true, like if you go to the web version here and you create the ASP.NET web application, that can run on anybody's browser. That's when you create that application, you create it it'll run on anybody's phone, tablet, whatever it might be. So what I'm going to do, again, for these sessions, they're just kind of introductory. I'm going to try to give you an idea of how to create or how these three different types of applications are created. One of the sessions we have an interest is actually creating web applications. So that one would be more specific to what you want to do. So we're going to just teach you kind of how to make a project, how to create a desktop application, and then we'll see if we can show you a console application too. So, but keep in mind that Visual Studio can create Android applications, can create Apple TV applications, can create Apple Watch applications, can create iOS extensions, iPhone and iPad apps, right? So the limit, right, is Python. We can create, Python applications with this. So again, it's a Microsoft product, but it's an IDE, and it really allows you to build a whole bunch of different cool stuff. And you'll see when I start to manage the product, you'll be like, oh, that's a lot easier to see that way, right? So that's the domain of what we're going to go through. So what I'm going to do to make things kind of a little interesting for you is I'm just going to kind of think about like a calculator type app, right? Just to make things easier, and to try to create an app that will basically take two fields and add them together or do some sort of mathematical kind of function, and output the difference, right? So what I'm going to try to ask you to focus on is that as I do this, remember that this is the application environment, the development environment. We're creating an app that's going to be executable that you could then distribute to anybody who's got a Windows machine. And I'm going to show you how that works too. All right. So keep in mind that what we're really doing is we're using the development environment to create this application, design it the way we want it. But then once we're happy with it, we want the whole world to use that. Anybody who's got a Windows machine. And that's really the trick, right? That's the catch, is that you don't want to deliver Visual Studio Community to everybody. You want to deliver one file, one tiny little file that's going to run and do these amazing things that make people's lives better. But that distributable, we call it, is what we're really after, right? From a business perspective. Okay. Okay, so I don't see anything in the chat. I didn't hear anything. So if there's no questions, I'm going to start with this part of the demo. So I'm going to make a new project. And that new project, I'm going to actually choose a Visual C project, and I'm going to create like a user interface type program that we can kind of demo here. Okay, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to create what's called a Windows form app, and it just creates like the typical classic form that you would see Windows programs do. And I'm going to call this interest calculator. Okay. It's the interest program, and it's a calculator that we're going to create. And it's going to keep it in our kind of repository folder here. And we're going to choose the default framework, which is on this system, which is 4.6.1. If you write older apps or apps that you want to run on older systems, you can choose older frameworks to run them on, like the systems that you know aren't going to have certain newer updates. But since we're just running it here, we're going to take the latest. All right. So you change the name, choose the Windows form app, and now we just create our application. And what happens is Visual Studio will bring up your different kind of designer windows, and everything about these forms that you'll see are controllable. So anything you want the form to say up here, or be color-wise, or drop, color schemes and things like that, you can always control, right? Your toolbox, your Explorer information is over here. So this is the application over here. And your toolbox is a list of every different control that you may want to use in your application, right? So if you say, oh, I would like to have some sort of a checkbox or a combo box with a drop down or whatever it might be, you design these things on paper or on a whiteboard or whatever you want to do, a scratch pad, and then you just turn them into software. And it's a really cool way to do it. It's very visual in nature, and it's a lot of fun too. So what we'll do is to start this off, we'll kind of name our form, and our form is called Form 1 currently. And what we'll do is we'll just kind of make this, calculator project, right? Actually, you know what we'll do? We'll leave that. We'll call it the calc form. But then in the actual name, what we'll do in the text, what we'll do is we'll call it calculator project. And then this is now what everyone's going to see in the calculator project up here. And what we usually do is we work with something called panels. And when we drop a panel in, every different panel, everything that sits inside that panel is going to be movable, right? When you drop controls in and they kind of float around, when you want to move them somewhere, you kind of have to move every control separately, and it gets very, very tiring very fast. So, I try to make my life easier by using the panels, right? And then we can kind of, bring this in here and so forth, right? And so now that we have our panels, now we can start dropping in some controls. And perhaps we want something to do with a few text boxes, right? So let's just say we have, let's just say we bring in our text box 1, our text box 2, text box 3, text box 4, text box. Okay. And what you'll see is they're kind of like all over the place. So we move them over, we kind of scroll them this way. Again, very, very visual in nature, and very, very easy to use. Okay. And now we want to basically have, right, perhaps we want to drop in some sort of maybe we want this to be like an interactive kind of web browser, right? We want to actually have some sort of a web form show up here. So we drop in our web browser here. And now our web browser is going to be able to kind of show a web page. And maybe we want some sort of data window or something like that. Maybe we want some sort of a data grid view down here to show us some data, right? And we can choose a data source. We'll leave that for now, but we can kind of have some data scrolling down here, right? And now what we do is we save this, make sure the project is saved, and then we're going to kind of highlight this over here and move these up so they're a little bit more organized. And now what we'll do is we'll put some labels in. And now we're going to put some labels in for label 1. We'll put some labels in for label 2, label 3, label 4, and label 5. Okay. And now what we want to do is we want to basically say, okay, let's not go into that yet. Bear with me a second, folks. Let me just open this up here. Okay, so if we have our labels here on the on the right hand side here, we have our labels. So let's say this was value 1, or we say something like enter value 1. And then we have enter value 2. And then we have enter value 3. Type in enter value 4. Type in total, right? And we're going to say total value. Okay, so now we have, a field for value 1, a field for value 2, a field for value 3, field for value 4, and a field to calculate and display the total values of all these, right? So when we now start to look at our calculator, we'll kind of save this and we'll hit the start button. The start button is going to basically figure out, it's going to compile it and tell you any errors you have down here, and then it's going to bring up, the application like it's going to look to the user. Now, this particular program here that I'm dragging around, this is the actual, right? This is the project. So it's going to ask for value 1, it's going to ask for value 2, ask for value 3, ask for value 4. The total, we don't want to type in the total or figure that out. We just want to click a button and have a total, right? We want to calculate it. So it's not really doing that yet. It's also not showing us any website that we wanted to have come up. It's also not showing us any data that we wanted. So we have some work to do, and that's okay. But we didn't get any errors, and that's okay. So now what we want to do is we want to think about where we want this button to be, right? So if I if I extend this down a little bit, this particular, extend this control too, if I can. That's okay for now. If I extend this down a little bit, what I want to do, if I go to my toolbox, I want to go to one of my buttons, right? So you see I have a button here. And do I have to do that? No, but what I can do is I can say, all right, let me put a checkbox here, and let me put a combo box here, and then let me put a button here, right? And now what happens is we start to kind of have this little interactive piece down here that says, um, if we change checkbox one, we say, process or whatever it might be. And this here is some sort of list of options. Maybe we want to actually process based on state, calculate tax based on state or something like that. What you do is you say, New York, New Jersey, Arkansas, Connecticut, and Wyoming, right? Your company only has businesses in those states, so you want to control what states are going to show up in that drop down, right? And then you have your button, and you just want to say okay, right? Or total, something like that, whatever it might be. Okay. And now you want that to be your form. All right. So now you're developing this form that's going to run on anybody's machine in the world. So now you can start saying, oh, I kind of like the idea of being able to create some sort of a helpful program. Maybe it's for medical purposes or something like that. And I want to be able to send it to people and have them just use it, right? Well, they're not going to use this. You don't want them to see all your design work. This is IDE, this is Visual Studio. What you want them to get is the final version of the software so that they can just run it, right? Okay, so before we get into the coding piece, let's do a couple of things here just for aesthetic purposes. Let's shrink this data window down a little bit, right? Let's bring the panel down a little bit. You notice what I'm doing? I'm bringing the panel down, which means that I can bring the entire, once I select the panel, I can bring the entire section down. If I had to organize all those, if I had to select all those individually, that would get a little tiring, right? That would be a little bit troublesome. Right? And now we want to just kind of make this a little, but by using panels, my point is that by using panels, it is a lot easier to do that. So now I want to go into, every time I hit enter, it's bringing me into the coding, which we're not ready to do yet. So we're just going to use this panel window over here. So I'm going to call this the very cool calculator project. Okay. Did I do that? I want it to be capital. So the very cool calculator project. Okay. And we're going to basically make this, if you go over here, you can do the image, you could do the image align, right? You could basically say this is going to be centered. You can come over here and you can do the fonts. So you could change the font to be, 20, and so you can drag this over in the middle here. You can make it bold. Okay, you can make it bold. Give it an underline or whatever you want to do. All right. So now it's kind of like more like a piece of software. Now you're kind of, designing something that people are going to say, oh, this is kind of easy to use. But now we have to kind of make it work, right? So now let's say this text box one, it's hard to kind of remember what text box one is, right? So let's call this value one. Okay, we're going to call it value one. Let's call this value two. Value V2. Right? Let's call this V3. Let's call this V4. And let's call this total. Okay. I'll just call it tot1, right? Just in case you have multiple totals. Now, as we collect values and we click total, we want it to basically turn the value box into the total of these other four. All right. So what we do is we're going to do a code behind this button. So this button is an object, but we're going to code behind it. So when you click the button, it actually does something. And we're going to add V1, V2, V3, V4 together. And then we're going to set tot1 equal to the sum of those. So you double click on total, and now you're in what's should be very familiar to you from the coding perspective, is that now you're in you're in a C environment, right? It's C#, and it has its own little kind of attributes, but through the .NET Studio, but this is kind of where we do this. So basically, we're going to create some variables here that are double in nature, so we can do decimal points, and we're going to basically say double. I'm going to call it DV1, right? Called DV1 equals converts dots to double, and we're going to say v1.text. Okay, so whatever text is in the whatever text is in the fields, that the V1, V2, V3, and V4 fields, it's going to convert it into a variable that has a double value, so we can actually do a calculation. If you wanted to know what would happen if we didn't, it would just concatenate. It would take the string variable, so you'd have a long string of the values of the numbers. It wouldn't actually do a mathematical calculation. So now we're going to do a double. We're going to do a double dtot, and we're going to add dv1 plus dv2 plus dv3 plus dv4, okay, and with a semicolon, and then we're going to update the tot1 dot text equals dtot. So we're going to set that text field to display the total, but it's not really the mathematical total. It's just the display of it. Okay. Oh, and what we have to do here is we have to convert the error message that you get here with the red underline. You have to convert dots to text to string. Sorry, to string. Okay. So now we save this. Now what we're going to do is we're going to go back to the form, take a look at it. And what should happen is that we're going to add 1, 2, 3, 4, and then it should turn the total value into those. And what happens when we start it, it'll compile it. It'll bring up the project. So it's looking pretty cool now. It's looking a lot better than it did. And if I type in 34, 567, 234, and 560, 579, and I add it, it's going to add up to 1514 for me, right? Which is good. It's what I wanted. I even use double, so it should actually do decimals, and it does, right? So if I add in, dot 2012, dot whatever, dot 56, and dot 78, it should actually come up and give me the double value. Okay. So, and if you notice, if I check off the process here and I drop down for Arkansas, I can do different things with those fields. I can, whatever values those are, I can actually also include that in my process here. Only calculate value 1 and 2 if it's Arkansas. Only calculate value 4 and 5, if 3 and 4 if it's New York, right? So your program is only limited by what your imagination can do and what your needs are. Visual Studio and C# and the forms don't have any limitations whatsoever. Okay. So one thing would be cool is if we could actually, like, say we were doing some sort of a tax program here or something like that, and we wanted to show the I don't know, some sort of a grid here that updates off of some sort of a program, another website. So what we could do is we can go into calculate. Let's just look at current Arkansas tax rates, something like that. And let's say we go to the tax calculator website. Hopefully we'll see how this works using this, but let's just say we went to general rates, just a calculator. Okay, so let's say this is the page that we wanted to basically include in our to make things easier for people. What will happen is that if I come here and I default to the web browser, the name of the control is web browser 1, right? So if I do web browser 1 dot navigate, right, and I put in my website, okay, what'll happen is that what should happen, it might generate a few errors depending on what's possible for it to do, but let's just see. I may need to check something real quick on this. C#. Let's look at what it's telling us to do. Web browser navigate. Looks like it should just navigate to it, but I may have put that in wrong. Let's just see what. See what they do. Yeah, it's right here. It's actually should do it. Let's see if it does something more simple. Maybe the website itself is causing you problems. Let's just see. Okay. I may be doing something wrong on that one, but basically you can embed this web control that will activate that will include a website that's actually working and functional and is live and is editable. So that's one of the ones I like to use, surprisingly, and it's not working for me. So anyway, that's fine. Okay, so so now we have this particular program, and that program will basically load up and run. What you're really doing with this program inside your IDE is running it in a protected mode, right? It's running your code in step-by-step decompile mode. It's not running as fast as it should. It's letting you work through all your bugs and everything else in a visual environment. Now, this particular, when you look at the actual Solution Explorer, right? When you go to the properties of the Solution Explorer for this project, all of your code and all your files and everything else are located in this particular folder. So if we go to this folder here, right, and we just bring up the interest calculator folder, right? Inside this folder, there's an interest calculator, right, folder, and then there's something called a bin, a binary. this is where your executables are kept. So this one right here, it says application. Every time you compile and test it in Visual Studio, it's also creating this version here. Now, this version, this executable, you don't need, so just to give you an idea of this, we're going to minimize Visual Studio, and we're just going to place the executable, just one file, no Visual Studio, no installs, nothing else, no other install at all, just any Windows machine in the world at all. And I double click on this and it's the same program, right? And hopefully out of everything you take out of today, if you haven't, done this level of stuff yet, this is what it's all about. This ability to basically have the same functionality. This ability to have the same functionality in the executable that you have in the Visual Studio environment is really what it's all about. The studio allows you to design and think outside the box and test things and see how things look or whatever. But at the end, you want to be able to take this executable, put it on a website for someone to download, email to somebody or whatever, be like, hey, I got this really cool program. It does all these cool things and it'll help you streamline your business. Well, how do I get it? It's just one file, right? I'm not saying sometimes there's other files that you include. They're called DLLs, dynamic link libraries, that you're using. So I'm not saying that you don't a lot of times have that, but it is how you distribute your software. Okay. So basically we're going to go back to our Visual Studio. So there's a couple of chats in the window. I just want to take a look at them if you don't mind. So the first one is from Simran. Let's leave it a quick summary. Okay, this Simran, we're recording this, so we're also gonna post this to our YouTube channel, so you can go back and watch it. And the next one is from Johnny. Is there a way to change the coding language where we are using and connect different languages to speak to? So within Visual Studio, for a project, you're choosing kind of a desktop project or whatever it might be. So once you choose that language that you will, all your forms are built in that. Now, when we come, to our toolbox or whatever it might be, if I go to project and I say add new item, I'm adding a new item to my project, but that new item could be anything I want. So let's say you're building a software application and you're like, you know what, JavaScript just does this better, but I still want my executable to do it. You just build a JavaScript application, or you build, you build your an F# script or something like that, or whatever it is you're looking to do. You just kind of choose that and then you make that product, but it becomes part of your project. So the main tool, the main executable you're creating is going to be one language or another, but it doesn't stop you from creating other types of files that your project is going to call, if that makes sense. So hopefully that answers those. And it looked like there was one more. Okay, yeah, that was from Simran. Yes, Simran, the video will have everything we've done so far. So the PowerPoints that we showed earlier today, these are all in there as well. Okay. Okay. So the one thing that I wanted to show too is the concept. Once you put a data window in, there's a separate interest program that's already on the website from years past, but we do it every semester, or at least every year, is SQL Server, Microsoft SQL Server as a separate session. And that's all data driven. So it's creating databases, managing databases. That's good. And you should watch the old videos and you should come to that interest session for sure. But applications attached to databases, okay? Like the application is, you could have hundreds of developers and programmers writing different applications, but they all attach to the same database, right? That's just how the software world works. The data itself is the valuable part of the process that has all that data, that is your customer data and everything else. But the application is what you've asked your employee to do, or what your boss has asked you to do, and you choose the best language and best development tools to use, but you're attaching to data to manipulate the data, to display that data, whatever it might be, right? So this data form that we dropped in here, when we went to Toolbox, if you remember, we went to a data grid view and we dropped it over here. And essentially what we're doing is where, in this little arrow here, you're choosing down, right? You're basically saying, what data do you want to show in here? What columns and so forth do you want to show in here? And what we do is we basically add something called a data source. The data source tells the system what to look for. All right. So if we choose a database and we choose that database and we choose a data set, we're going to basically try to use this ETIC training connection string, and we're gonna let's do. I haven't done this part in a while. Let's include sensitive information. Let's just see what it does here, and we're gonna call this connection string, and that's fine. And what we do is we just kind of choose the tables we want to show, right? We want to show information for. So if we have like something like provider services or something like that, we can name the data set as data set 1, and then we can choose what data we want to show, right? And if you look at like edit columns, this is all the data. So we're in an application, we're in a software, we're in the IDE, but we're attaching to some other MySQL database or an Access database or SQL Server Express database, and we're telling it like what data we want to see in there. Okay. And what we do is if you only wanted, say, a couple of fields in there, you just want, service type, whatever, you can remove all the others and only have in there what you want to do. So I'm just removing the specifics from the control. I'm not removing the data itself or editing the database. I'm just removing the specifics from the control. And what will happen is that it's asking me, do I want to be able to edit? Do I want to be able to reorder? Right? Do I want to preview the data? Right? If we preview the data, we can see what's in there. Right now, it's not showing any data, but we can do that. And then what happens is when we save that and when we start that program to debug it, it's not just my program, and it's not just the fact that I can do this and do this and do this and total it. Oh, I didn't do it. That's error handling, by the way. I didn't have zeros, so it gave me an error. But basically, let's see what happens if I did this, if I did this, if I did that, and then I totaled it. Yeah. So again, error handling. If the other fields are blank, then don't do the total, right? Or replace them with a 0. That's how you have to do error handling. And this is actually showing all the data that you'd want to be able to access and see from that database. And similarly, as before, if we copy this executable and we delete the one that's on the desktop now, and we paste this one here, this is the new version, right? This is version control 1.001, 1.002, 1.003. This, if we ran the other one, it would run without the data. But if we run this one, it's got all the changes in it. All right. So now we have like an executable that you can give to somebody else anywhere in the world. When they run it, they're going to see the values. They're going to have the calculator function. They're going to see the website. They're going to basically see the data that's in there. So these are the things you can do with Visual Studio that make it very easy and very kind of effective to make. I mean, we're only doing this, 45 minutes. We wrote an application already, right? So you see kind of how beneficial it can be. It's not going to take you months to build something. So anyway, so that's the concept of making a new project, choosing what type of projects you have, and then choosing the different controls, right? So in your toolbox, you have combo boxes and browser, right? You can put like a browser, right? If you want to search for a file, you could put a little browser dialog box up here. You could put images in there. You could do whatever you want to do, just like a web page, but just like software. You have all these different tools to use. You have menus and toolbars, right? You have all kinds of things. So the tools are pretty cool, and once you start getting used to them, they're a lot of fun to play with. The one thing I wanted to kind of point out to you is that if we were to say basically make like a console app, right? So if we were to basically say, let me close this solution here, but let me make a new one. right? And let me make a console app, right? I was playing with this just before the session to show you how AI today can help you really be an unbelievably efficient developer, right? So somebody says, hey, we need a program that we just need to run on command. We don't need a user interface or anything. And we needed to do all these complex things. So I was thinking just like of moving files around to as something you wouldn't want to do, copy paste, copy paste, copy paste. It would be something repetitive you don't want to do. And what you do is you select the console, app option, and then you select console demo is the name of our project, right? Console demo. And what happens is that you basically just come up with, you don't come up with any kind of you don't come up with any kind of user interface, any forms or anything, right? This is simply the only thing that's here. So once we compile it, it's just going to run as you have it. So what I was doing, just as a just kind of trying to be a little more modern in the demo, we haven't really done it before, was that I had used ChatGPT to generate a program that simply copies files from one folder to another, C#, right? And it gives you this particular output. And you have to be very specific, just so you know. I mean, you've probably experienced it too, but you have to be extremely specific, and it does a really good job. Otherwise, it's a little too general. But I just took that text and created this copy demo. And if we copy this and put it into that particular right, it's pretty good. It's pretty darn good. This is basically telling me that it's going to copy everything from the ctemp demo folder to the ctemp demo 2 folder. So if we went to our C drive and we went to our temp folder, and if you look at what it's doing, right, it's saying temp demo. So if we make a folder called demo, okay, and then we make a folder called demo 2, okay. Now demo has nothing in it right now, but if I make a file called test 1, 2, 3, all right, and we'll just put some garble in there just so there's something in there. Now what happens is that demo 2 has nothing in it, but our program is written so when we run our program, it's going to copy everything from demo 1 to demo 2, right? And you can see what it's basically doing. It's setting up two string variables that are pointing to the locations of the folders. And then we are importing it. Notice up here, we're using system and system.io. If you don't import these packages, you can't do anything with the operating system. But in C#, it's very easy. It's just 2 files. And this is what it's basically doing. If it exists, if the directory exists, it won't do it if it doesn't exist. But if they both exist, then just copy them in there. And you can see it's doing kind of the combined function here. It's getting the file names, combining them, and then it's doing the file.copy, right? So technically, if we go to build and we go to build solution, it succeeded. There's no errors. If we go to the solution here and then we go to this particular folder, remember this is the actual file folder where the product is being kept. Okay. All right. Now in console demo, in bin, in debug. Okay. This console demo is my executable, right? I didn't run it yet. I didn't even test it. It could fail, but we didn't get any errors on there. So if I put console demo over here and I run this, okay, all right, right now it's running. There's gonna be no user interface at all. You might not even see it load. But what we want to do is we want to basically say, okay, in my temp folder, I have a demo folder with 1, 2, 3 in it, and I have a demo 2 folder with nothing in it, right? Okay, that's where we are. Now, if I run this, it just kind of popped up and went away, right? We didn't see it run at all. But if I go back to my folder, demo 2 now has the file in, right? So when you think about using C# in Visual Studio and creating like any kind of program, any kind of series of actions that you want to automate some process in your office. You are now the office manager or you are the IT director, and you're like, man, every time I go to these machines to do an update, I have to do 16 different steps. Write software, right? Create software, create console scripts that you're going to do, update one, update 1B, update 1B, 2B, 3B, 4B, whatever. And then those programs just run, right? Use software to simplify your life, to automate your life. The first time I ever did this in this type of interest environment, I wanted to try to start kind of making these a little bit more current and up to date. And basically, the way I did that was to just use AI, right? We gave ChatGPT a very, very specific task, using extremely specific, right? Using extremely specific details. In about 30 seconds, it had a really good base as far as coding goes, copied it right into a project. And within 30 seconds, we had it. No, I shouldn't say it. Within 5 minutes, we had a really good console executable that could be sent all over the world. And people could run that executable and basically, simplify their life, hopefully. Now, conversely, not for this topic, but when we do our cybersecurity interest, program, this is also unfortunately how malware is created too, right? Same concept. Okay, so we are right at our 2 o'clock stopping point. I usually leave about 15 minutes open for questions, so we went over a little bit, but I will stop the recording and open for any questions. And then if I don't hear from you after the recording stops, I hope you enjoyed it. Hope you learned something, and good luck in your careers.